Bible heroes, lessons from David Goliath. Have you ever faced a moment in your life when everything seemed impossible? A challenge so big, so overwhelming that you didn't know how you could possibly overcome it? Maybe it's a personal struggle, a mountain of debt, an illness, or a relationship that feels beyond repair. Perhaps it's a fear you've carried for years, something that constantly holds you back from stepping into the future God has planned for you. We all have giants in our lives, don't we? But what if I told you that the key to facing your giant wasn't about your strength, your skills, or your ability to control the situation? What if the secret to victory in these moments wasn't found in what you can do, but in what God can do through you? Today, I want to take you back to a story in the Bible that has inspired countless people throughout history. The story of David and Goliath. We've all heard it, right? A young boy, barely old enough to be called a man, stands up to a warrior so tall and strong, he seems unbeatable. The odds are stacked against him. The enemy is armed with the finest armor and weapons, while David, just a shepherd, carries nothing but a sling and a stone. But in that moment, something incredible happens. David steps onto that battlefield, not in his own strength, but in the strength of God. The truth is, this story is so much more than a simple tale of a giant falling. It's about faith. It's about courage. It's about knowing that no matter how big the giant, no matter how impossible the situation, God is bigger. And just like David, God has given you the tools, the strength, and the courage to face your giants too. So I want to ask you, what's your giant? What's that thing in your life that feels like it's too big to overcome? I'm here to tell you that you don't have to face it alone. Just as God was with David, He is with you. The story of David and Goliath teaches us powerful lessons about how to face our giants, how to trust in God's power, and how to be bold and courageous, no matter how small we might feel in comparison to the challenge before us. Stick with me as we dive into this incredible story, and I'll show you how the lessons David teaches us can help you conquer your own giants in life. Let's start with the battle itself. And remember, with God, there's no giant too big to fall. This introduction sets the stage for a deeper dive into the story, engaging the audience right from the start with personal reflection and making the story of David and Goliath relatable to their own lives. Let me know if you'd like me to continue from here. Chapter 1. The context of the battle. Let's set the scene. Imagine the Israelites, God's chosen people, standing at the edge of what seemed like defeat. For 40 days, they've been paralyzed by fear. They're facing an army, the Philistines, who have come to wage war. And at the head of this massive army is Goliath, a giant over 9 feet tall, wearing a suit of armor that made him seem invincible. This guy wasn't just tall, he was terrifying. His armor alone weighed more than most men, and he carried a massive spear with a tip so heavy it could pierce through any shield. But here's the catch. Goliath wasn't just a physical giant. He was also a mental and emotional giant. For 40 days, he had been taunting the Israelites. Day after day, he would come out and challenge anyone to fight him. But no one dared to face him. They were all terrified, believing that there was no way they could defeat such a formidable opponent. Now imagine how the Israelites must have felt. Every day, hearing Goliath's challenges, seeing him stand there mocking them. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've faced a challenge so big, so daunting, that it paralyzed you with fear. Maybe you've looked at your own giants, whatever they may be, and thought, there's no way I can defeat this. You know that feeling, right? It's easy to get stuck, to see the giant and feel hopeless. The Israelites, for all their strength and history, were stuck in that moment, frozen in fear, unable to move forward. But there was something they didn't know. there was something that would change the course of this battle, and that something came in the form of a young shepherd named David. Chapter 2. David, the unlikely hero. Now, let's talk about David for a minute. David wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained for battle. He wasn't the one anyone expected to rise up and fight the giant. In fact, when David's father sent him to the battlefield to bring food to his older brothers, no one took him seriously. He was the youngest of 8 brothers, and all he had known up until then was tending to sheep in the fields. His brothers were out there fighting wars, and David was back home taking care of the flock. But David had something the others didn't, something far more powerful than any sword or shield. David had faith. When David arrived at the camp, he heard Goliath's insults. He saw the fear in the eyes of his brothers, the other soldiers, the king, and something inside him stirred. He couldn't stand by while this giant mocked the living God. You see, for David, it wasn't just about facing a physical enemy. It was about defending God's honor. It was about standing up for what was right, even when everyone else was paralyzed by fear. David wasn't intimidated by Goliath's size. He didn't focus on how big the enemy was. Instead, he focused on how big his God was. And that's a key lesson for all of us. We often look at our problems, our fears, and we see them as giants that can't be defeated. But David didn't see Goliath as a giant. He saw him as a challenge that could be overcome by the power of God. And that's what changed everything. You see, David's perspective was different. While the others were looking at the battle and seeing how impossible it was, David saw an opportunity for God to show his power. He didn't rely on his own strength. He didn't think, I can defeat this giant because I'm strong or experienced. No, he trusted that God would give him the victory. In that moment, David teaches us a powerful lesson. Our giants are not too big for God. In fact, they are the perfect opportunities for God to show us his strength. When we face giants, we often focus on our limitations, our fears, our lack of experience, our doubts. But David shows us that when we put our trust in God, even the greatest giants can fall. And that's exactly what we need to remember as we face our own battles. The giants in your life, whatever they may be, might seem impossible to overcome. But with God by your side, you can face them and walk away victorious. As David stands before Goliath, ready to face him with nothing but a sling and a stone, he isn't thinking about how big the giant is. He's thinking about how big his God is. And that's the mindset we need to have when we face our own giants in life. It's not about what we can do on our own. It's about what God can do through us. When we step out in faith, like David did, we align ourselves with the power of God. David's victory over Goliath wasn't just about a small shepherd boy beating a giant. It was about God showing his power in the face of fear. And that same power is available to you. You don't have to face your giants alone. With God, you are never alone. You can have the courage to stand tall, even when the world around you seems to be telling you to back down. So as we move forward in this story, keep this in mind. No matter how big your giant is, God is bigger. And just like David, you have everything you need to defeat it because you have God on your side. Chapter 3. The Power of Faith Over Fear. Let's take a closer look at something that really sets David apart in this story: his unwavering faith. When David heard Goliath's taunts, when he saw the fear on the faces of those around him, he could have easily backed down. After all, everyone else was afraid. The soldiers, the king, his brothers, they were all trembling, each one wondering who would dare to fight this giant. But David didn't see the giant the way everyone else did. He saw it differently. David didn't focus on the size of Goliath. He didn't focus on the weapons or the armor or the years of experience Goliath had. David's response was simple yet profound. The battle is the Lord's. David knew that this battle wasn't his to fight alone. It wasn't about his strength, his ability, or his experience. It was about God's power. Think about that for a moment. How often do we look at our own problems, our challenges, and see them as insurmountable? We see the giants in our lives, whether it's a financial crisis, an illness, a difficult relationship, or any number of obstacles, and we think, there's no way I can do this. I'm too weak. I don't have the resources. I'm not qualified. We shrink back in fear because we're looking at our own limitations instead of looking at God's limitless power. David's faith was different. When he looked at Goliath, he didn't see a giant to fear. He saw an opportunity for God to show his strength. David had seen God's faithfulness before, in the fields where he had protected his sheep from lions and bears. David didn't need armor or a sword. He trusted in the experience he had with God, and he knew that if God had been faithful to him before, he would be faithful again. David's faith wasn't blind. It was based on real experiences of God's power in his life. And that's the kind of faith we need to cultivate. It's easy to say we trust God when things are going well, but when the giants come, that's when our faith is tested. The truth is, God doesn't just give us faith for the easy moments. He uses the hard times to strengthen our faith, to show us His power in ways we could never imagine. If you're facing a giant in your life right now, I want you to remember this. You don't have to fight it alone. The same God who helped David defeat a giant is the same God who is with you in your struggles. And that's where true courage comes from. Not from looking at your own strength, but from trusting in the strength of God. So when the giants of life seem overwhelming, take a deep breath and remember, faith over fear. Trust that God is bigger than any challenge you're facing. And if God is on your side, no giant can stand in your way. Chapter 4. David's preparation. Now, let's talk about how David was prepared for this moment. It wasn't like David had spent his days in the king's army training for battle. No, David was a shepherd. His job was to take care of sheep. But here's the thing about David's time in the fields. It wasn't wasted time. In fact, it was precisely what prepared him for this battle. When David was in the fields, he didn't just sit around and do nothing. He was protecting his sheep from predators, lions, bears, whatever threats came his way. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't the kind of work that would get him any recognition or glory, but it was essential. David learned how to use a sling, how to trust his instincts, and most importantly, how to rely on God in times of danger. What we see in David's life is that God often uses the small, seemingly insignificant moments to prepare us for the big battles. David's time in the fields wasn't just about tending to sheep. It was about developing skills that would later be used to defeat a giant. David wasn't just learning to fight animals. He was learning to trust God in the midst of danger. Those seemingly small, everyday moments became the foundation for his faith and courage. Isn't that true for us as well? We often look at our daily lives and think, this doesn't matter. This is just routine. This is just the grind. But the truth is, every moment of our lives is a chance to grow, to prepare, and to trust God more deeply. Maybe you're going through something right now that seems small or insignificant. Maybe you're dealing with challenges that don't feel as grand as a giant in the valley, but they're still difficult. And I want to tell you this, those moments are not wasted. They are building your faith, strengthening your trust, and preparing you for the bigger battles ahead. David didn't wake up one day and instantly know how to defeat a giant. It came through years of preparation, years of learning how to rely on God. The same is true for us. The struggles we face today, no matter how small they seem, are part of God's plan to prepare us for the future. And when the time comes for us to face the giants, We will be ready because we've trusted God in the small moments. So take heart. If you feel like you're in a season of preparation, trust that God is using it. Those moments are not wasted. The lessons you're learning now are building a foundation that will allow you to face whatever giants come your way. And when the time is right, you'll be ready to step onto the battlefield with the same faith and courage that David had. Remember, the God who was faithful to David in the fields is the same God who will be faithful to you in the battles you face. Your preparation is not in vain. Chapter 5. Goliath's Challenges. Now let's shift our focus to Goliath. This giant, this enemy who seemed unbeatable, wasn't just a physical threat to the Israelites. He was also a master of psychological warfare. Every day, for 40 days, Goliath stood on the battlefield and taunted the Israelites, challenging them to send someone to fight him. He mocked their courage, their God, and their strength. He didn't just come with weapons. He came with words designed to strike fear into the hearts of anyone who heard them. Goliath wasn't just standing there as a massive figure. He was also playing a mental game, a game that worked on everyone except David. You can almost imagine the way Goliath's words would echo through the camp, drowning out the sound of hope and replacing it with fear. He was intimidating not just because of his size, but because of his words. He knew how to make people feel small, insignificant, and powerless. And that's how fear works, doesn't it? Fear is like a loud voice that drowns out the truth. It whispers in our ears, telling us that we're not strong enough, not capable enough, not worthy enough. Fear magnifies the problems in front of us until they seem impossible to overcome. It makes giants out of things that might not be as big as they seem. And just like the Israelites, we listen to those voices. We begin to shrink back, paralyzed by the fear that tells us we cannot win. But here's where things change. David didn't buy into Goliath's tactics. While everyone else was scared, David stood firm. He didn't see Goliath as a giant to be afraid of. He saw him as an obstacle that was standing in the way of God's plan. The challenge was not to defeat Goliath for personal glory or fame, but to defend the honor of God. This shift in perspective was everything. You see, the giants in our lives, whatever they may be, often come with their own set of challenges: fear, doubt, and intimidation. They tell us we can't succeed, that we can't overcome, that we're too weak. But the battle isn't just about fighting the external challenge. It's about winning the internal battle, the battle against fear, doubt, and the lies that tell us we're powerless. When we allow God to give us the right perspective, we begin to see our challenges for what they really are, not as giants that will defeat us, but as opportunities for God to show His strength through us. In your own life, when you face challenges, it's easy to let fear take hold. It's easy to let the voices of doubt and discouragement tell you that you're not enough. But David's response to Goliath is a powerful reminder that fear is not from God. And when we face our giants with faith, we are empowered to rise above the lies and see the truth. God is bigger than any fear or challenge we face. David didn't let Goliath's words control him. He stood firm in his faith, and that's the kind of courage we need when we face our own giants. No matter how loud the voices of fear and doubt get, we can remember that with God, we have the victory. Just as David didn't allow Goliath's intimidation to win, neither should we. Chapter 6. The role of God in the battle. Now, let's talk about something that is truly at the heart of this story: the role of God in the battle. David didn't go into that fight thinking, "I can do this on my own." He didn't rely on his own strength, his own experience, or his own ability to fight. David knew that this was God's battle, and that's what makes this story so powerful. When David steps onto the battlefield, he declares to Goliath, You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel." David wasn't just relying on his sling and stone. He was relying on the God who had been with him in the past, protecting him from the lion and the bear, and he knew that God would be with him now in this battle against the giant. And this is where we often miss the mark. Too many times we try to face our battles on our own. We look at our giants and we think, "I have to do this. I have to figure it out. I have to overcome this by myself." We forget that the battle belongs to God. It's not about our strength. It's about trusting in His. And when we step into a battle with God on our side, we're never alone. God doesn't just watch us fight from a distance. He's right there with us, empowering us to face the challenges ahead. David's faith was rooted in this truth: the battle was God's. He didn't need to worry about the outcome because he knew that God was the one who would deliver the victory. And that's the same assurance we can have in our own lives. We don't have to face our giants alone. When we put our trust in God, we are never powerless. God is bigger than any obstacle, stronger than any enemy, and faithful to see us through every battle. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed when we face challenges. But when we realize that the battle is not ours to fight alone, we can take heart. Just as God fought for David, He will fight for us. Our job is to step out in faith, to trust in God's power, and to move forward with confidence, knowing that He is with us every step of the way. So when you're facing a giant, don't try to fight it on your own. Turn to God. Trust in His strength. Let Him fight your battles for you. And just as He was faithful to David, He will be faithful to you. The battle may seem overwhelming, but with God, victory is already assured. Keep your eyes on Him, and He will guide you through every challenge, just as He guided David to victory over Goliath. Chapter 7. The Stone and the Sling. Now let's focus on something that's often overlooked in this story: David's choice of weapon. Goliath came out with all his might, his massive sword, his heavy armor, and his spear. He was ready for a fight, prepared to defeat anyone who came against him. But David didn't rely on any of that. He didn't wear armor, he didn't have a sword, and he didn't have any fancy weapons. All David took to the battlefield was a sling, a small pouch of stones, and his faith. And that, my friend, is a powerful lesson. In a world where we often feel the need to arm ourselves with the best tools, the best skills, the best resources, David teaches us that it's not about the tools you have. It's about how you use them and who is behind them. The sling and the stone, by all human standards, seemed like poor weapons to take down a giant. But in the hands of David, with God's power, they became the perfect tools for the job. Think about this. What do you have in your life right now that you might be underestimating? Maybe it's your time, your talents, your experience, or even something as simple as a small skill or resource that you think is insignificant. How often do we look at what we have and think, "That's not enough. I need more. I need something better"? David didn't make excuses about what he didn't have. He used what he had, and he trusted that God would make up for any lack. Here's the key. It's not about how much we have. It's about how much we trust God with what we have. Just as David trusted his sling and stone, we need to trust God to use the tools He's given us. Maybe you don't have all the resources you think you need to overcome your giant. Maybe you feel like your abilities are too small, too insignificant. But the truth is, with God, even the smallest things can be used to accomplish great things. When we place our trust in God, He takes what we have, no matter how simple or small, and uses it in ways we can't even imagine. David's sling wasn't magical. The stone wasn't special. But when they were combined with faith and the power of God, They became the perfect weapons to defeat Goliath. And that's how it is in our lives. God doesn't need our perfection. He doesn't need our strength. And He doesn't need our ability. He needs our trust. When we offer God what we have, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, He can take it and use it to accomplish His purpose. So what's in your hand? What tools do you have, however small or simple, that God can use to fight your battle? Don't underestimate what you have. Place it in God's hands, trust Him to use it, and watch Him work miracles. The sling and the stone were all David needed because he had the one thing that mattered most: faith in God. And with faith, there is no giant too big to fall. Chapter 8. The Victory and Its Impact. The moment is finally here. The battle is about to unfold, and David stands before the giant. Goliath laughs at him, taunts him, and mocks him, just as he had done with everyone else before. But David isn't fazed. He takes a step forward, pulls a stone from his pouch, places it in his sling, and takes aim. In one swift motion, he releases the stone. It flies through the air, hitting Goliath squarely in the forehead, and the giant falls. Just like that, the battle is won. With a single stone, David defeated the mighty Goliath. The giant that had terrified an entire army, the enemy who seemed unbeatable, was brought down by a shepherd boy armed with nothing but faith and a simple sling. But here's where things get truly powerful. The impact of David's victory was not just about defeating one giant. It was about how it changed the entire course of Israel's future. David's victory gave the people of Israel hope. It showed them that God was still with them, that no enemy was too great to overcome, and that they could stand firm in faith, no matter what they faced. Suddenly, they were no longer paralyzed by fear. They were emboldened, empowered by the fact that if God could bring down a giant with a stone, He could do anything. David's victory didn't just change the outcome of a single battle. It changed the hearts of the Israelites. They were reminded of God's faithfulness, and that made them stronger. They rallied behind David, and together they moved forward with renewed strength and courage. This is what happens when we trust God to fight our battles. Our victories don't just impact us, they have a ripple effect. When we step out in faith and overcome the giants in our own lives, we become a testimony to others. Our victories show people around us that God is still powerful, still faithful, and still at work in the world today. Just like the Israelites, when we see someone else stand firm in faith and overcome obstacles, it encourages us to do the same. David's victory also led to his own rise to prominence. He was no longer just the shepherd boy. He became a hero, a leader, and eventually the king of Israel. But what's important to remember is that his rise to greatness didn't come from his ability to fight or from his skills. It came from his trust in God. David's heart was set on honoring God, and that's what led him to victory. When we trust God in our battles, we not only experience victory ourselves, but we also inspire others and bring glory to God. The impact of David's victory was far-reaching. It reminded Israel of God's power and reignited their faith. And that's the kind of victory we should be aiming for in our own lives. It's not just about overcoming personal struggles. It's about how God uses those victories to impact others and bring His glory to the world. When you face your giants, remember this: your victory isn't just for you, it's for everyone around you. Your faith, your trust in God, and your courage to stand firm in the face of challenges can inspire others to do the same. And together, we become a powerful force for God's kingdom. So as you step out in faith, trusting God to bring down your giants, remember that the impact of your victory will go far beyond your own life. It will change the lives of those around you, strengthen the body of Christ, and bring glory to God. Your victory is more than just a personal triumph. It's a testimony to the power of God at work in the world. And that's a victory worth fighting for. Chapter 9. Lessons we can learn from David. As we reflect on the incredible story of David and Goliath, there are some powerful lessons we can take away. First and foremost, this story teaches us about the nature of God's power. We often think that our own strength and resources are what will carry us through challenges. But David's victory shows us that it's God who gives us the power to overcome. It's not about the size of the opponent, but the size of the faith in the heart of the person facing the challenge. David was an unlikely hero. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained for battle, and he wasn't anyone would expect to defeat a giant. Yet, it wasn't his strength or his skill that won the battle. It was his faith. David had a relationship with God. He knew from his own personal experiences that God had always been there for him. He had trusted God before, and he knew he could trust him again. When David stood before Goliath, he didn't see an unbeatable enemy. He saw an opportunity for God to demonstrate his power once again. This is the essence of faith. It's not about having all the right tools, all the right experience, or all the right circumstances. It's about knowing that God is with you and that He is bigger than anything you're facing. When we trust in God's power, we're tapping into a strength that doesn't come from us, but from Him. And that makes all the difference. Another lesson we can learn from David is the importance of preparation. David didn't just show up on the battlefield unprepared. He had spent years in the fields taking care of his sheep, defending them from lions and bears. Those years of preparation, though they seemed small and insignificant at the time, were the very things that equipped him to face Goliath. Sometimes we look at our current situation and feel frustrated, thinking that we're not where we want to be. But we must remember that every experience, every moment of preparation is building us up for what lies ahead. David's preparation wasn't just about learning how to use a sling or protect sheep. It was about learning to trust God, even in the mundane and difficult moments. It was about understanding that God's faithfulness in the past would guide him in the future. And that's true for us too. When we face challenges, we can look back on all the ways God has helped us in the past, and we can trust that He will help us again. Lastly, David's story teaches us about the importance of courage. It takes courage to face giants. It takes courage to stand up when everyone else is afraid. But courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting in faith, even when fear is present. Courage is trusting that God's presence is greater than the fear we feel. And when we step out in courage, we allow God to use us in ways we never thought possible. Chapter 10. Applying David's example in our lives. Now, let's take these lessons from David and apply them to our own lives. The story of David and Goliath isn't just a nice story to read. It's a blueprint for how we can face our own giants. So, what does it look like to apply David's example today? First, we need to understand that our giants aren't always physical battles. Sure, there are times when we face literal battles, but more often than not, our giants are the challenges that arise in our everyday lives. It could be a difficult situation at work, a strained relationship, financial problems, health issues, or even a fear that holds us back from stepping into the future God has for us. Whatever your giant is, you can apply the lessons from David's story. The first step is to trust God's power over our fear. Just like David, we must learn to see our challenges from God's perspective. We may feel weak, incapable, or unqualified, but God specializes in using the unlikely to accomplish His will. Remember, David wasn't chosen because of his strength. He was chosen because of his faith. And when we trust in God's power, He can take what we have, no matter how small or inadequate it may seem, and use it to do great things. Secondly, like David, we must recognize that our preparation isn't wasted. The experiences you've had, even the difficult ones, are part of God's plan to shape you for the future. Every challenge you've faced has been an opportunity for God to strengthen your faith. Even when you're in a season of waiting or feeling like you're not doing enough, remember that God is preparing you for something greater. Trust that He is using every moment to build you up, just like He used David's time as a shepherd to prepare him for the battle with Goliath. And finally, we need courage. Courage to step out in faith. Courage to believe that we can overcome. And courage to face our giants knowing that we don't have to do it alone. Courage doesn't mean we're not afraid. It means we act in faith despite our fear. God will be with you every step of the way, just as He was with David. You don't have to be fearless to have courage. You just need to trust in God's presence and take that first step. So how do you face your giants? Start by trusting in God's power, remembering that He is bigger than anything you face. Use what you have, no matter how small it may seem, and trust that God will use it for His glory. And remember that you are never alone in the battle. With God on your side, there is no giant too big, no challenge too impossible. When we face life's giants with the same faith, courage, and trust in God that David did, we are not only able to overcome our own obstacles, we are able to inspire others to do the same. Our victories, big and small, are a testimony of God's power, and they can change the lives of those around us. Just as David's victory changed the hearts of the Israelites, your victory can have a ripple effect on those in your life. Conclusion: stepping into your victory. As we wrap up this story, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your victory is not just about you. Yes, you will experience the peace and joy that comes from overcoming your giants, but you will also inspire others. Your courage, your faith, and your trust in God can serve as a beacon of hope for those around you who are facing their own battles. So, as you face the giants in your life, remember that the battle is never yours to fight alone. God is with you. And just like He was with David, He will be with you, empowering you to step into your victory. Take that first step of faith, trust in God's power, and watch the giants fall. The victory is already yours. Now, it's time to step into it. God has equipped you, prepared you, and made a way for you to overcome every giant that stands in your path. So go forward in faith, knowing that with God, there is no giant too big, no obstacle too great, and no battle too fierce. You are more than a conqueror through Christ, who strengthens you. Thank you for walking through the story of David and Goliath with me today. Remember, you are not alone. Your faith in God will lead you to victory, just as it led David. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep moving forward. The giants will fall, and you will stand victorious in the name of the Lord.